Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Informed Dissent. I'm Jamie Reed, whistleblower, mom of five, co-executive director of the LGB Courage Coalition, currently slightly jet-lagged from a trip to the Pacific Northwest. We are a proudly gay-led podcast. Each week, we're going to look at what's happening across the gender landscape, what it means for LGB people, and for everyone who cares about evidence-based medicine. With me are our co-hosts. Who do I go first? Lauren Legere, lesbian advocate and co-executive director at the LGB Courage Coalition, and Corey Cohn, a gentleman of trans experience, writer, and advocate who brings rare clarity and courage to this conversation. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you both?
Jet lagged.
I'm not jet lagged. I'm just tired. I'm excited. I'm so excited to be here.
So we're going to start with the news of the week. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments in Childs versus Salazar. I love the way that they name Supreme Court cases. So Childs is the therapist who is being represented by ADF, and Salazar is the random administrative person in Colorado who is supposed to administer parts of this law. So her last name got named in the Supreme Court. This is a Colorado case challenging the state's 2019 ban on what it calls conversion therapy for minors. When the court hears a case, that meant that this week the justices listen to both sides' attorneys, but they will not rule immediately. Their decision is going to come months from now. At stake is a big question. Is talk therapy protected under the First Amendment or professional conduct that the state can regulate? These oral arguments will matter for therapists and families nationwide. There are many, many states that have these so-called conversion therapy laws on the books. Social media, Lauren, you can bring us up to what's going on in the Twitter sphere.
So this week, social media, mostly X, kind of went crazy after British academic Eric Kaufman claimed that trans identification among young people is in a, quote, free fall. His chart went viral, but journalist Ben Ryan looked closely and found that the survey didn't actually measure trans identity at all. It asked students to choose male, female, or non-binary. So the headline everyone shared was based on basically a category error. Ryan argues that what we're seeing is a shift on how students at elite campuses label nonconformity, not proof that trans identification is collapsing. It's a good reminder that data can be weaponized before anyone checks the methodology. In other news, Governor Newsom signed Assembly Bill 749, ordering a state study on youth sports participation by gender identity, race, income, and disability. Supporters call it a neutral, fact-finding measure. Critics say it could pave the way for expanded trans participation in female divisions. Newsom is an asshat. However, Newsom also vetoed Senate Bill 418. The bill would have required insurers and pharmacists to automatically dispense 12-month supply of hormone therapy to anyone prescribed it, unless a doctor specifically requested a smaller amount. The veto drew frustration from trans activists who saw it as a setback for access. This is crazy. So in the same week, California advanced one piece of its gender policy agenda and pulled back from another. A reminder that even in progressive states, the politics around gender medicine aren't one-directional, especially when the state governor is thinking about a run for president.
Well, I've got a story, Lauren, and this one hits a little close to home because in Texas, their Attorney General Ken Paxton has launched investigations into several transgender advocacy organizations and subpoenaed PFLAG, which I don't know what it stands for anymore. PFLAG National for Documents, about what they say support families of minors seeking gender affirming care. Civil liberties attorneys say the campaign chills lawful advocacy and weaponizes state power against parents, but civil liberty attorneys also now support medical scandals. Okay, when I was in Texas in 2022, I saw an ACLU. They have people that are on. Oh, I'm sorry, Jamie. You wanted me to stop.
No, I just wanted you to tell you what PFLAG used to stand for.
Well, I know it used to be parents and lesbians and friends of gays and I don't know.
Yes,
something like
gays
that.
and lesbians. And now it's no longer an acronym, it's its own name because
That's
it's
right.
not really for gays and lesbians. Sorry, go
Yeah,
on.
I know that. Well, but when I was in Texas, I was giving testimony, and I was out with our cohort, and there was an ACLU advocate person on the corner. They dress all in the little uniform. And I said, "Hey, I have a very good friend's child who is a minor and is trying to get access to hormones, but his parents won't let him get access to testosterone. Do you have any ways here that you can help me get access so that this minor can get hormones that he needs?" And the ACLU guy said, "Oh yeah, we have contacts with PFLAG to help minors get access to hormones."
So that's what they're doing now,
And it was recorded.
which makes it make a little bit of sense why the Attorney General is looking into
Yeah,
that organization.
yeah. It's recorded, and I tried to get the video to pick up some steam. It never did. Maybe I can find it on my X. But absolutely, recorded it. That's how we are. And there's more news, separate news. On HBO last week tonight with the contemptible John Oliver. That's my editorializing. I don't like him. They aired a segment targeting Bari Weiss and mentioned our friend and co-host, whistleblower Jamie Reed. The episode criticized Bari Weiss's reporting and commentary on gender medicine, framing it as misleading or politically motivated. You know, this is all yellow journalism. It's not comedy. It's just the unhinged John Oliver, barely restrained rage, shouting it at the teleprompter. But the segment sparked strong reactions online, both from Oliver's supporters and from those who saw it as an unfair attack on journalists and whistleblowers raising legitimate questions about pediatric gender medicine. The debate over the segment continues to play out across social media.
Corey, did you watch it?
I skimmed through and watched the parts that mentioned our esteemed co-host Jamie Reed. It's just this is the same thing that John Oliver. I think his producer is a man who identifies as a transgender woman. Anyway, there's no sense of fairness, no fair play. It is all ideological warfare. And the sooner that we get that man off the air, the happier. The sooner it will be that I'll watch HBO again. I avoid all that crap.
Even the Dragons show, did you not watch?
The Dragon Show, no. I avoid drag everything now.
Well, that's it for our brief news overview. We're going to take a deep dive today into two stories. One is the Supreme Court hearing, and one just dropped yesterday. But I found that both were tied together about speech. So the Supreme Court case came down to this concept around speech, where our free speech lines are. And the second article, which we'll mention in a minute, looks at when does speech become treatment in the case of the therapist, and when does it become harm? So the Supreme Court this week heard Childs versus Salazar asking whether a therapist's words are protected speech or conduct or regulated treatment. The court will take months to rule, but the questions from the bench and a lot of the news coverage of this basically pointed out or believes that they are going to rule in favor of the therapist, which would then make Colorado's law moot or illegal, that it can't be stay on the books. However, it's never been enforced anyway. Before we go deeper into this, I want to take a moment because I think the three of us represent a potential age cohort where this debate over what conversion therapy really even means and if it's really being applied anymore. So, what I wanted to do is just basically ask any of us, myself included, have you ever been in any kind of therapy, formal or informal, that tried to make you who you were not? So, in terms of conversion therapy for sexual orientation, were you ever in any therapy that tried to make you straight or make you not trans identified or make you not gender non-conforming?
I have not.
No, not really.
Was it ever even brought up?
Well, this is back in the 90s when I was seeing a therapist about this. So there was obviously a lot of probing questions about why I felt the way that I did. And it wasn't the way that we think about trans at this point is completely different from how it was 30 years ago when it was a pathologized condition. So at the time, it wasn't about identity or trying to dissuade somebody from being trans or not. It was to try to determine what the root source of that identification was and what could be done about it.
So that's 1990s US.
1990s, right?
Did any of you ever have pressure through religion or school or family about being more normal or potentially not gender nonconforming?
I did not have any of that pressure until about 20 years ago when my friends started to transition, and then there was a lot of social pressure to transition. But I never really had too many problems about being gay. I mean, I got beat up pretty badly once, but it wasn't like I wouldn't say it was in the ethos of like the community I was living in. It was very liberal. I never had any real problems. I mean, some name calling in high school, but my family always supported me. I always had friends that were fine. I was lucky. But then, like I said, in my early 20s, when a lot of my friends started to transition, that's when I really started to feel that there was pressure on gender nonconforming women like me.
So I went to a Catholic school for elementary and high school. And I do remember in my curriculum there being textbooks that said that gays, I remember it was a religious class, gays and lesbians should be discriminated against in workplace settings that would have a high incident of a gay or lesbian interacting with kids. I remember that in a textbook, and I remember doing something in class in reaction to it and sitting out in the hallway being put out in the hallway for the rest of the class. I disrupted it in some way. Did you ever seek out therapy to try to become more normal or to...
No, I did not.
Yeah, it's so different now.
Yeah.
The question almost doesn't make sense. The properties of the universe are not similar anymore.
Okay, but the laws in Colorado, for example, are equating and using this word conversion therapy in the law that this therapist is challenging. Do either of you know anyone that underwent what we would consider real conversion therapy or?
No. I've seen accounts of people online, but I haven't known anybody in person.
Yeah, I don't know anyone that actually was subjected to conversion therapy, but I did have friends that were in more religious or conservative households that did have a harder time being gay or lesbian, definitely. And I think that that struggle, especially for those who really got a lot out of their faith, it's a lingering conflict for them.
So, what do you think about her challenge to Colorado's law? Should we have a law banning talk conversion therapy regarding gender identity and sexual orientation?
Well, do you mind if I ask a refining question before
Yes,
we
go ahead.
tackle that one? Um, do we want to attack the premise of whether such a law should exist, or do we want to figure out how we think that the Supreme Court should rule?
I think both.
All right, all right.
Do you think a law like that should exist?
I have really conflicting feelings about this particular case because do I want gay conversion therapy practice to practice any again? No, I don't. Um, but in their arguments that say this is free speech for therapists, I do have a problem with that because I do think that therapists, their speech is essentially their job or their conduct with a client. And I do think that like we can't just have them free for all allowed to say anything. I mean, we've already seen how messed up therapy can get, but and this is an extreme example, but perhaps you have a therapist that has a bias against fat people or something, and somebody comes in who's anorexic and or I don't know if this is making sense, but essentially you could have somebody that was saying, yeah, you could lose some weight to someone with an eating disorder because they perceived that they were a little bit heavier than they should be. I mean, I do think that therapists have to be held to a higher standard while in session with their clients, and there should be some things that like they that need to be regulated in some way. Like I'm not saying that therapists can't say whatever they want on social media or to their friends, and I don't think that that should affect their job. But if you're saying harmful things, I mean, if you're in a situation where you're going to therapy and you're really in a bad place in your life and you're vulnerable, you're all the more susceptible to malicious intent. And, or even just someone who's maybe incompetent. So I do think that there needs to be boundaries around how therapists approach things with their clients. Like there are things that are inappropriate to discuss with somebody in a vulnerable situation. But I also the problem here is that that sexuality and gender identity have been conflated and wrapped up in the same law. I do think that it's actually a therapist's job to kind of inquire as to why someone has a trans identity. And I
But
think
not, but not if it's someone's sexual orientation.
even that, I mean, if someone is like, if this is, you're talking about a 13-year-old kid that's confused about their sexuality, I think it's perfectly acceptable to want to explore that with them.
In the Supreme Court case, as it was laid out, one of the issues that was coming up is that this is talking about minors because the law is specific to minors. But it did keep coming back to if the client seeks this for themselves, so if the client comes in and says, I want to talk about why I feel like I'm gay, or if the client comes in and says, I want to talk about why I feel like I have this gender identity, that's what this case kind of gets at, is that the Colorado law was sort of hamstringing what the therapists could say in session.
Well, was it though, or was it written with an exception for exploratory therapy? Because I've heard that too, that there
No.
was no exception for exploratory therapy in this particular ban.
No, but the question that did come up in the Supreme Court hearing was whether or not the therapist even has standing, because no one has been prosecuted in the state of Colorado for this law. And so, one of the reasons why you are allowed to basically bring a case is because it actually has an effect on you. So, one of the questions that the justices were asking was, is this even really actually being enforced? And I think that's a fair question. Are these being enforced in any state? And one of the elements that ADF was trying to say is that they argued, yes, that there has been some enforcement consideration towards their client. She's been reported. But that it also has a chilling effect, that these laws just have had this like chilling, they use the phrase chilling effect across the United States in these states, which basically has scared therapists away from thinking that they can do these things.
Yeah,
Corey,
that I would agree with.
that
That
it
there has
has
been a chilling effect. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there absolutely has been. I mean, there are
There,
therapists
there are
that,
therapists who are afraid to take on clients who identify as trans because they could be reported for saying the wrong thing. Even for somebody who clearly is going through a complex set of different types of mental health crises. Um, Even pushing back on a client like that creates a risk that somebody can lose their license.
yeah, and I think the chilling effect has been that, you know, good, like Corey said, therapists are afraid to take trans identified patients or patients questioning their gender identity. And I think for the most part, these are probably the therapists that these people should be talking to because they want to do an like actual exploration. And then we're left with, fanatics that are just affirming everyone.
okay, but question, do you feel like do a lot of actual minors who are holding a trans identification, do they actually want to go to an exploratory therapist, or do their parents want them to go to an exploratory therapist?
I don't know. I mean, I think each case could be different. I mean, I think there are probably some kids who are seeking to understand themselves in a way that they would be open to therapy. I think that the zeitgeist has made that fewer and fewer, but there must be some that are willing to talk to people and really explore that. But again, that they really can't.
Corey, your thoughts. Do you think that in general these laws should continue to exist, or?
Well, when I look at what happened with Skermeti, the Tennessee case, where the Supreme Court ruled that states have a right to regulate this, it's really difficult to try to figure out how to thread the needle.
Yeah.
Where you say the states have the right to regulate physical interventions.
They call it I think they're calling it conduct.
Right. But in fact, even Ketanji Brown Jackson was trying to get detail on this to come out. Is this a medical procedure? That's the question. And I think you can, when you're in a position of a therapist, you can very easily cause certain behaviors in your clients that have a substantial material effect on their health and welfare. You are in a trust position and you're going to be advising young people on different coping mechanisms for the pain that they're feeling. So this is not like pulling up at a park bench and having a talk with the local wise woman or grandpa. This is you are paying money, often covered by insurance under the uh, auspices of medical care. And I can't see how the First Amendment argument that this is speech and not professional conduct
Yeah.
can prevail. If it does, that's going to be very shocking to me because there's not a consistency. It's hard to see the consistency with to reconcile that with Skermeti. But if you don't mind me making another comment here, which is that the left-leaning justices were sure excited to try to reconcile this with Skermeti, saying, "Oh, this is exactly like Skermeti."
Yeah, they were.
And there's an alternate universe that we'll never see where this case was decided first, and it influences Skermeti instead of
Oh,
vice versa.
wow.
I also think that we really run the risk here. If you're saying therapists have free speech while they're in session with a client, you run the risk of having some really crazy things being said. I mean, there is a component of, there should be some confines. There should be some like ethics that therapists go into session with. And if we're just saying this is just their speech and we have free speech, then what exactly is their job?
Well, what if part of that becomes that the therapists um becomes part of what they tell the client, like sell to the client, like I'm going to do this kind of therapy. And does it change your feeling if they are upfront at the beginning and say,
Not for
you're
me.
signing up for this?
No, I mean, they can say anything. They can say anything. How would you know unless you know, they could say, "Oh, I do this particular modality." Well, I don't have any idea what that modality is or what it should include. Like, I'm not a therapist. I don't know. I really just do not like this case. I would like something a little more clean. I would like something that doesn't involve sexual orientation wrapped up in it because it's already been convoluted so much. I just don't like this case at all.
So if the
I think
therapist,
either way, we are not going to get what we want. Both sides.
because I think we should be clear, the therapist herself has said she would like to legally be able to explore sexual orientation and discuss that with clients from a Christian-based worldview, that, she has a predisposed concept around sexuality that she would like to help people explore why they feel like they're gay or lesbians and potentially walk them away from that. If she did not have that, but only wanted to do gender exploratory therapy, is that the case that you would rather have?
Well, look, I support the medical bans because that was a last ditch effort. The doctors were causing harm. We can measure the harm. We can count the harm, and they're not doing anything about it themselves. And there just were not any avenues for people who have been harmed to get justice in a court of law. That is an extreme measure to ban something. So I don't like bans generally, but you have to ask: does the government have the ability? Is it in their rights to do that? And I think it is. And whether it's trying to convince teenagers that they shouldn't be gay, or shouldn't be trans or whatever it is, if the government's going to exercise that power, it shouldn't be up to the Supreme Court to settle that as a policy issue.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think this is really a case for the Supreme Court. This is a case for, like, should we be regulating therapist speech? We probably should. Is this a bad law in Colorado? Sure is. Colorado's bananas. But I just don't see how this helps anything, because if therapists have free speech, they also have the ability to just affirm. It cuts both ways. You either have free speech or you do not.
Yep.
Or you either have like confines around your contact with the client, or you don't. Do we want either one of them? I don't think so. And again, to Corey's point, they just decided that states have the right to regulate these kind of things. I think
Have the right to regulate medical practices. That's always been a state's right.
I think they have the right to regulate this also.
yeah, I do too. I mean, I don't want to see I think the affirmation model is complete shit. But I think there's a better way to get at this. And might it take longer? Yeah. But this I think is going to make a free for all.
I think this is a good place to go into the next story. I'm going to bring us over there, and if you want to tie it back at all, please absolutely do, because I see these two as tied. So, the story that came out yesterday was published in the Washington Post, and this was a harrowing investigation that they called White Tiger. It, at its core, was a story about a 13-year-old girl who was suffering from a lot of distress and was eventually coerced online to live stream her suicide. Anonymous users were talking to her in real time. And I think the tie that I felt right away is that speech, I guess this is a question. Can speech be as dangerous as any weapon when it's used to control someone in crisis? So can speech, that speech of the therapist in the room alone with a young person in crisis, or the speech online when you're anonymous and you're convincing someone to hang themselves, I think at the core, these both talk about how speech is not neutral. It can heal, maybe, it can persuade, but in this case, it also could destroy. So, did both of you read this White Tiger story?
Yeah, it was disturbing. It was really disturbing that people find enjoyment, because there's a whole group of people they reference here that do this for fun, try to get young vulnerable people to self-harm, and it's twisted. No doubt it's twisted. I think that the problem, and this is not to justify anything, these people are monsters. I find it appalling. However, we have a bunch of vulnerable young kids with carte blanche on the internet, where they can see anything and anyone can get to them. Like these kind of things do not happen if you are a stable kid, you have other interests, you're not chronically online. I mean, the issue is why we're creating such vulnerable kids. And after we create them, we just hand them a phone and say, "Good luck. Hope nobody terrible finds you."
Corey, did you see the story?
Yeah, I looked at it. I've been following something similar. There's a gossip website that people, trans activists particularly hate, called Kiwi Farms.
You always bring it
Um,
back to Kiwi Farms.
well, they've been tracking this for quite some time. They've got some threads of a number of, they call them lol cows. They're subjects of interest.
Can you repeat that? Lol
Lol
cow,
cows, L O L
LOL,
L O L.
and then cow, like the animal.
Yeah,
Okay.
and they have been tracking this for quite some time.
This meaning the phenomenon
This phenomenon
of people
yeah,
trying to get other people to harm themselves through
right.
internet pressure. Okay.
So one of the most central individuals in this type of network. This happens like on discords, right? So kids join a lot of discords. They get talked to by strangers. Some of the discords are they'll hug box people who come in for the first time. They'll make friends. They'll be very invested and chatty. Please come back tomorrow. I miss you, and please come into this private chat with me. And you're so mature. You're so much more mature than the other girls your age. Can you send me a photo of yourself? And it just keeps escalating until they get something which is like a blackmail material, and they'll get the the victim to harm a family pet or harm themselves, cut themselves, and then they'll say, "Well, we're gonna let every one of your schoolmates know that you've done this, and unless you do something else, which escalates it further, right?" These young people are not sophisticated. They don't have any uh, coping mechanisms. They might not have the trust of their parents because they're getting in over their heads. And it just keeps getting deeper, right? Until the point where the subject, the victim, might feel suicidal, and then they just get bullied to the point of uh, doing something. And there's some speculation that that Minnesota trans shooter had been involved in a network like that, either as a victim or a perpetrator. Probably there's a conveyor belt where you start as a victim, and the way that you climb out of that victim role is sort of like a multi-level marketing scheme, where if you get enough of your own victims, that's probably some protection for yourself. And yeah, this is a thing that's been going on for a while.
Okay, so I want to read a small segment from the story because I think it circles back to what you were just saying, in part about Discord. So, one of the elements of this story that is why I think it fell into my kind of purview or my feed was that this young person was trans identified. So, this was a young woman who was identifying as male. So, the article is using he, him pronouns throughout. So, I'm just going to read this section. His parents saw him get better. Online communities played a big role, they said. Jay joined an online LGBT plus support group. He launched an Etsy shop for his craft and did speed crocheting with online pen pals. But Jay's parents were alarmed at what they discovered on his computer between his stays in residential programs. Jay's father, Colby, an executive for an online shipping company, found anorexia forums in Jay's search history. Jay was frequenting chat rooms devoted to cutting on Discord. They call this a popular social media platform among gamers. I'm going to pause for a minute and say that Sarah Mittmeyer and I were texting about this a little bit yesterday because she pointed out that she finds it wild that the parents saw this child's online interaction with the LGBT community as the positive and the anorexia and the cutting as the negative, and not seeing any what I
Glaring similarities.
exactly. So, I mean, cutting, anorexia, self-harm, trans identification in a young person, to me, you know, self-harm. It's the through line there is self-harm, but they were allowing her to be in these platforms because the LGBTQ one was deemed somehow positive. Yet, Corey, what you know of these subgroups is that they actually intentionally target trans identified and gay and lesbian identified kids, don't they?
Well, they target vulnerable kids, and that's, that there's a subset.
Okay. So in the story, they track and they try to find who was the perpetrator. And the other line here, where trans seems to be the through line again, is that the perpetrator, Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, but was cross-dressing. Is that what
Mm.
they said?
Yeah, they found this guy in Germany, I believe. He was cross-dressing, also studying to be a doctor for the intent to harm people. So that's also very dark. But yeah.
So the question that the whole article tries to get at basically is, can they charge these other young people who push this person towards this outcome? And if so, what is the crime? So is there a crime here?
I mean, it seems like there is, isn't there?
Okay, what's the crime? Coerced assault? Is digital homicide a crime?
I think that was the issue, right? Is that they couldn't actually, there's nothing in American law to charge any of these people with, right? I mean, he was eventually apprehended, but it was in Germany, and um, I'm not sure what their regulations on speech are in Germany. I know you can just self-ID into any category in Germany, but I don't know anything about their speech laws. Or in America, I think that how could we create a law that made this illegal? What we could do is limit social media access to for minors. What we could do is address the just unfathomable mental health crisis among Americans right now.
So I've seen this come up before where people talk about regulating what minors can access in terms of social media, but then I've also seen it argued that the LGBTQIA youth uh, need this access because it's their only way for them to find others like them or support them or to be in community.
Well, I guess if you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet.
Ori,
What?
I, I will say that I remember hearing Shannon Mintner and Andrew Sullivan talk about how we never really got at the problem of the isolation that proto-gay young people were feeling in rural areas, that there was this long push that all the gay people should just move to the city and that's where you find your people, and that there was some hope that online communities would become that bridge and help gays and lesbians, find each other. You seem skeptical and don't know if that's
Online communities aren't communities, though. I mean, that's not real life happens in real life, and I think we should be encouraging kids to have real life friends and real life interests. I mean, if we stop creating vulnerable children, let's teach kids resilience. Let's not hand them all iPhones.
I'm going to devil's advocate a little bit here. I think that this young woman crocheting and knitting and selling her things on Etsy, I don't see anything harmful in that. Is that not an engagement tool?
You're not getting, I think comparing Etsy to online platforms like Discord and Instagram and stuff is not they're not really the same. And how old was this kid when they started an Etsy shop? Like their parents
13?
had, yeah, their parents had to be involved in that. There has to be, like, you're 13. You can just open a bank account? No, she couldn't do that herself.
That's something I'm gonna look into. So can a 13-year-old just set up their own Etsy account?
I mean, it has to go somewhere if they're going to make money, so they have to have a bank account.
You know, the there's something that sort of links back to the previous case that we're talking about when we're thinking about the parents' involvement, right? So kids don't just pick therapists. Parents are going to vet the therapists and pick them for the kids, irrespective of what the kids' goals are. The parents have all the influence about which therapist they're going to get. In the first case, you have parents who are deeply invested in their child's welfare, and they want to have choices available for working with their kids for maybe exploratory therapy, or maybe if they are a Christian family, they want a Christian therapist to be able to explain the nuances of their theology with respect to homosexuality. They want that in a therapy setting. Here you have almost the opposite. You have parents who are not invested at all in what their kids are doing. They're just saying, here's your laptop, here's your school laptop, go install Discord and go find people who will spend time with you.
I don't know if that's the case for this family. This mom, I mean, in the story, it sounded like they were trying to find a balance. And the balance that they were trying to find was they thought that having Jay, letting her access what they were referring to as LGBTQIA plus kind of community online was the positive, and that they were trying to balance out keeping
All right.
the harm away.
But I'm gonna say, if you have a minor, especially somebody who's elementary school, middle school aged, you actually should be reading their messages and who they're talking with.
Yeah, I agree with
You
that.
should have full access to
Yeah,
who they're
there should be no
communicating with.
secrets.
And then, if you have an especially vulnerable teenager who's being picked on or manipulated, you should still be looking at their messages. And that sort of privacy is something that you should be earning over time and with demonstrating your behavior. But the worst problems that you have, like, I don't want to make this too personal, but my parents really had no involvement at all with what I was doing with my time past a certain age. And if they
While
had
you
cared
were still
about
a
that, maybe
minor,
my life would have been different.
like while you were still a minor, like a
Oh yeah.
teen.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I was kicked out of my house when I was a minor.
okay, so balance that out with the desire to not have helicopter parents.
Well,
So,
I mean, I think I did. If your children are in a state of crisis, they need more care. When they are managing on their own, and that's a matter of judgment that you have to make. You have to give kids a chance to learn those sorts of things. But if for some reason they're not, you can't just follow a book plan that's been written for every child to follow. It's got to be tailored to the needs of the child.
Yeah, I
so
mean, different kids reach different stages at different ages. Kids are some kids mature really quickly, some kids not so much. Some kids are really influenced by their peers, and you have, some oddballs who are like fuck you, I'll buck the system every time. Like, you have to know your kid and you have to make age appropriate decisions for them and with them. I mean, this kid was very obviously very vulnerable. I mean, the idea that they could be in LGBTQ chat spaces and that it never crossed anyone's mind that there could be anyone with any nefarious purposes in these chats is crazy to me. Knowing what we know today about how easily predators can get to your children online. Like, they're not going to have a screen name that says, I want to kill kids. It's going to be like, I'm a fuzzy pink elephant. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can say anything in these platforms. You can be anyone in these platforms. They could very well have told her they were another 13-year-old girl or boy or whatever.
But in the story, some of them were. Some of the kids who, at the time of the suicide, were pushing her and talking to her were other minors.
Yes.
Right. This is why, to Corey's point, their parents should have also been looking at their chats too.
I
We
maybe
have this weird illusion in modern society that we've kept our kids safe by keeping them inside and giving them a screen, when in reality they're probably safer running around your neighborhood than they are with a window to the darkest chambers of the internet and the human mind at their fingertips.
Yep.
Okay. I will agree with that. I think that's where I want to feel like that's where I don't want the helicopter parent. So that's where I want my kid to be able to um you know, I've seen parents, I've taken, my younger kids to the playground and I've watched the other parents not even let their kids interact with each other on the playground. They're trying to direct play of like a 5 and a 6-year-old, like taking turns on the slide and, not letting them just be kids. I think that's a different parenting question than the one you're talking about here, which I think you nailed, which is that it's way more dangerous probably to be on Discord than it is to ride your bike without a helmet.
Yeah, I mean, if you're at the park with your kids and you see some creepy dude walk up, you can protect them. But
Yeah.
online, this creepy dude has an avatar of a 14-year-old girl, and nobody knows the difference.
Yeah, you definitely want to protect your children from creepy dudes in the real world. However, you might see a drag performer who wants to dance for your children, in which case you should embrace that. That's special.
Thank you, Corey, for always bringing us back to the humor of the scenario.
Well, how's that funny?
You're deadpan. That's why I love you.
I'm making a point.
You're making a good point, and you're making a point to a parent who
Well,
brought my kids to drag queen story time at my local public library.
well, I'm gonna call back. I'm gonna call back to something that you said before, Jamie. You said that when you were in Catholic school, that you were taught that it's okay to discriminate against gays and lesbians in certain situations, particularly in cases where they're working with children. And I would argue that we have come all 180 degrees from there, which is that if you see somebody who's from a sexual minority, the last thing that you should ever do is assume that they would ever harm a child. You should definitely put your children in the care of anybody who's in a sexual minority because they're special.
Or just says that they are, because again, online, you can say that you are anything.
Well, I mean, even in the real world, because how many of these
Yeah.
drag queen story time people have actually been found out to have criminal records for sexual misconduct?
Okay, so I read that story yesterday and felt horrified by it all afternoon. And now I'm going to spend all of this afternoon also feeling horrified as a parent that we just we don't have the tools to do. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we do have tools to do better restrictions for our kids online that I just don't have the wherewithal or understand how to use. Maybe they do exist. But part of my question about this white tiger case is not just how do we charge the predator who went after those kids, but why is there literally no form of regulation of like how is it that we have a public platform where you're streaming a child's suicide and there's no moderation or oversight for that platform itself too? Like, should
How are
the
you going to regulate something like that? The best way to do that, to regulate children being harmed, is to keep these children out of these social media things. I mean,
so
it's
then why
I'm
can't
not I
social
wouldn't give my
media
10-year-old access to Discord. I just would not.
Okay, but why can't Discord help me as a parent also keep my 10-year-old away? Why can't Discord say, in order to access my site, you have to, I had to, I was trying to set up a Shopify something to like sell a t-shirt and I had to prove who I was with two forms of identification that matched and then take a picture of myself. I don't understand. Like,
Oh no, we could do that. We
Yeah.
could make social media companies make you have to verify your age, but we don't because
why?
they have too much money and influence.
How about that gossip website or that app that was for women so that they could share stories about how terrible the men that they were dating were?
Which one was this?
It was from a couple of months ago. It's an app you could download, and it was basically like a tell-all. You could find a man who cheated on you or something like that, and put all his details in there. And to use this app, you had to send in your ID to verify that you were a real person. And they had a data breach, and all the data, all the IDs and stuff got downloaded and stolen.
Okay. So every possible solution has a possible downfall.
Uh-huh.
Keep your kids off. Keep your kids offline, folks. Keep your kids offline. Make them go outside.
Well, that's so much easier said than done, but I guess
I
it is.
agree. I agree. But we can get the phones out of schools. I mean, the schools that have done that have seen huge success, and the kids actually like it. Kids want boundaries. They do.
Well,
Because I think it's a very dangerous path where we tread if we start saying you can't say such and such.
it's a dangerous path if we try to regulate free speech,
Yeah.
but it's potentially okay if we come up with ways to keep minors and children away from those.
Dangerous places. Yeah. Like yeah, that's where this push should be. It should be keep minors away from potentially dangerous places. You don't let kids walk barefoot across a sea of broken glass, and that's
Well, I was going
essentially
to say you used to tell your kid, don't go into that crack house on the corner, and now Discord is the crack house on the corner.
Man,
yeah, well,
St. Louis is a rough place.
St. Louis is a rough place. I mean, not where I live now, but yes, St. Louis has been a rough place. It's true. You know, I would tell kids, you can't go to this block or you can't go.
Yeah, my parents, I remember they told me uh, to stay away from a particular person's yard, and that was a person that they thought was not trustworthy.
And did you listen? And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and the neighborhood knew and you knew, but now that yard is Discord.
All right.
Perfect.
well, we didn't solve the world's problems today.
No, but I've been very sad from this story ever since
This
yesterday.
this story was really it was horrible to
I,
read. It was. I mean, this kid was failed in so many different ways.
I will say that I saw a lot of reactions on Twitter complaining about the journalists using assigned female at birth and he, him pronouns. But I'm gonna say that the way that this was written was really powerful. They wrote this story in a really powerful way, beyond that major error. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they did miss the piece where they could have actually talked about the trans identification as very linked to the cutting and the self-harm and the anorexia. They could have talked about how the trans identification itself was just another manifestation of this kid's instability and vulnerability. So I think that was a blind spot, but otherwise, it was just really harrowing to see what our children are dealing with on a daily basis without any supervision and what
Okay.
can result from that.
I have one more question before Lauren, you can take us out for the week. Um, does this episode need a trigger warning?
Because of my language or because
Or
of the
language
topic?
because of the topic? No. Okay. I I also saw that in response to my tweet that people were saying I don't really believe in this concept, but that story was really, really challenging. Okay, well, you've made it to the end and you got no trigger warning.
All right, well, that's it for this week's Informed Dissent. We want to thank our sponsors and colleagues at the LGB Courage Coalition, a proudly gay-led organization fighting for evidence-based medicine and the right to reality. You can find the full newsletter and all source links at lgbcouragecoalition.substack.com. Until then, stay informed and ready to dissent when needed.
Bye.